The Department of Homeland Security recently shut down. And the reason why is federal agents came into states, killed civilians. Those same states tried to investigate the crimes committed by federal agents, and the government blocked them from receiving the full evidence of the case. Now, Congress is refusing to fund the agency until there are guardrails in place to prevent this lack of accountability and that there's independent oversight to ensure that the federal government is doing their job appropriately. This is not just a petty argument about immigration policy. This is about, do federal agents have any accountability and will they answer to anyone? Here's the full situation. Congress failed to pass a funding agreement for the Department of Homeland Security after Democrats demanded new oversight and guardrails following multiple deadly incidents involving federal immigration agents. Republicans claimed that Democrats were playing politics with national security, and Democrats are saying that they are refusing to sign a blank check to an agency that has been involved in multiple deaths. Trump recently spoke on this issue on Air Force One. Let's hear what he had to say.
We have to protect our law enforcement. They've done a great job. I just got finished saying that we have the best crime numbers we've had in many years, and on murders, 125 years. And that's despite a lot of people that shouldn't have been let into our country coming into our country, criminals, many, many criminals. But we've taken out tens of thousands of people, brought them back to their countries. Many of the criminals that were brought in, allowed to come in, have been removed. So, we're okay. But to have the best crime numbers, which aren't made by me, these are made by people that do that, many left leaning. We have the best murder numbers. Horrible thing to say, but we have the best murder numbers since 1900. That's before my father was born. 125 years, think of it. The best crime numbers since 1900 having to do with murder, and really good crime numbers, the best in years.
Are there any demands that Democrats are making that you're okay with?
Well, I don't like some of the things they're asking for. We're going to protect law enforcement. We're going to protect ICE. They're part of the whole system that is working.
Yeah, here's another thing with Donald Trump. You can see it in every speech that he gives now. He really has a hard time following a trail of thought, and he jumps to these like talking points that he has been trained on or people have continued to give him praise for within his own circles. That's immediately what he goes to. They asked the president of the United States, "What do you think about the demands of Democrats in order to fund Department of Homeland Security?" Well, Washington D.C. has some of the best safety that we've seen in years. When I came in here, it was actually really bad, and now it's terrible to see the mental decline of somebody on the national stage who's the most powerful person in the world.
Losing 2, 3 people a week. Over 100 people a year were being murdered in Washington. Now it's considered a very safe city. And we did that. I did it over a fairly short period of time. This is a Democrat shutdown. This has nothing to do with Republicans. This is a Democrat shutdown. They're upset that the crime numbers are so good. They're very unhappy that the crime numbers are so good. They're very unhappy that there's a movement for getting voter ID. They want voter ID. The population, 98%, want voter ID. They don't want voter ID because they want to cheat in elections. They also
But they
want
just
other
forgot to
things.
cheat
They
the
don't want
2024 election,
mail-in
apparently.
ballots.
So none of this has to deal with the actual funding agreement. But that's what we could find on Donald Trump responding to questions about the funding agreement and what Democrats' demands are. The Democrat demands are very simple. We need to have more oversight. We need to allow states to cooperate with the federal government when investigating these crimes because we can't leave it to the Department of Homeland Security to be the biggest critic of the Department of Homeland Security. Trump's whole administration has been about these boastful, flamboyant displays of power. We are the strongest federal agency in the world. We will take on people that are the biggest criminals, even though all reports show that 85% of the people being detained have zero violent criminal record. That apparently doesn't matter because they can do whatever they want. They will make a highlight reel of whatever they do and they will eat it up themselves. We can't trust them to do their own oversight. We need external oversight to ensure that proper procedure is happening. Meanwhile, live reporting from the Associated Press shows that the shutdown negotiations are ongoing and could stretch out if neither side backs down. Unlike the record 43-day shutdown last fall, the closures are narrowly confined, affecting only agencies under the Department of Homeland Security umbrella, including the Transportation Secretary Administration, U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection. But the work of ICE and CBP will mostly continue unabated thanks to billions in funding from Trump's 2025 tax and spending cut law. This is the third federal shutdown in just a few months of Trump's second term. A Department of Homeland Security shutdown isn't going to mean that immigration enforcement ends, as we just read in that article. ICE and Border Patrol are already receiving massive fundings because of the increases last year. So deportation operations will continue largely uninterrupted. But airport security, like that's still operating. TSA workers will be considered essential. But the real impacts are Coast Guard non essential missions that are suspended, maintenance and training that's delayed for many government officials, cybersecurity and disaster readiness is going to be strained, and federal workers going without pay. Just a reminder, the Department of Homeland Security is not just immigration. It handles disaster responses, airport security, coastal patrol, cyber threats, and counterterrorism. So when the DHS shut down, it affects more than just border policy. This also is breaking news at this time of the recording, but Tricia McLaughlin, who's the spokesperson for the DHS, just recently resigned and is leaving the agency. In a post on X, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem praised McLaughlin's performance on the job, which she's had since the beginning of Trump's second term. Tricia McLaughlin has served with exceptional dedication, tenacity, and professionalism, Noem said. During times as spokesperson, McLaughlin took on a high profile public role defending the administration's contentious immigration policies on television and social media. Noem did not say why McLaughlin was leaving, but said the department was sad to see her leave and wished her well. We know why she's leaving. Nobody wants to have the legacy of being attached to this administration. It is absolutely terrible. And while there's still a very small contingent that will support the Trump administration, no matter what, it's about 20% of Republicans. History will not look on them favorably. And people know that they will be forever etched into history as the people who condoned these terrible killings. The federal government being able to just kill civilians and seemingly get away with it. Jonathan Ross has not been held accountable. The two agents complicit in killing Alex Pretti have not been held accountable. This is something that many people are wanting to distance themselves from because they know what the reputational fallout will be even 2 years from now. This article from the Minnesota Reformer shows that the FBI won't provide Minnesota investigators with evidence in Alex Pretty's killing, the state says. So the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension was denied access to the evidence. They were blocked from the crime scene. Even after obtaining a judicial warrant, federal authorities still took control of the investigation. That all needs to be emphasized. A state agency with a warrant was blocked from investigating a fatal shooting that happened in their own state. That is the whole point of having state judiciaries and state law enforcement, is to ensure that the law is properly being applied within the borders of that state. That's not an immigration issue. This is a federal power versus state oversight issue. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has historically investigated shootings by law enforcement officials, but has been blocked from participating in the investigations of federal immigration agents, killing 2 Americans and shooting a Venezuelan national in 3 separate incidences in Minneapolis in January during Operation Metro Surge. Federal agencies can't be the ones that investigate themselves. They can't have a monopoly on all of the evidence within these criminal cases. We need to have state and local law enforcement in cooperation to ensure that as much transparency as possible is released to the public. The negotiation is ongoing. There are still standoffs that are happening, and Democrats have now sent a counteroffer to the White House that would reopen the Department of Homeland Security while adding additional oversight conditions. Democrats have pushed for a ban on agents masking their face, mandatory body cameras, a requirement for judicial warrants for immigration arrests, and an end to roving patrols, among other priorities. The White House and Republicans have pushed back on the mask ban and judicial warrant requirements. They are so strung up on not wanting a warrant. These are the same people that say that they love the Constitution. They are huge patriots of the country, yet they're violating the Fourth and Sixth Amendments openly. They don't want a warrant in order to enter people's homes. That is what civil rights are. You're supposed to be able to protect yourself from the federal government. They are supposed to go through proper procedure in order to violate your constitutional rights. And anybody who calls himself a limited government conservative should agree with those conditions. This whole story is not just about DHS or one agency. This is about federal power versus state autonomy and authority. What are the rights that are given in the Constitution for states investigating on behalf of their constituents? Will states be able to provide transparency to their constituents and investigate crimes that the federal government is potentially implicated in? Or should the federal government be able to have complete monopoly and power over the evidence of these crimes that they're involved in? Can Congress force accountability through funding and by stopping these procedures that normally are just business as usual from going into effect? Can Congress advocate on behalf of their constituents and show that our civil rights are more important than a federal government who is acting chaotically in order to get the maximum amount of numbers for deportations or people out of the country? This really is contingent on that key issue. Federal agencies should not be able to investigate themselves. We need states to be able to access evidence. This is not about immigration. It really is about who watches the federal government and are the people protected from the abuse of an authoritarian regime.